I'm looking to discuss what variables are in PowerShell and how you can use them to make your PowerShell use even better than what it was before. So if you're new to PowerShell, variables are very similar to variables in other coding languages. If you're new to any sort of coding or scripting, variables allow you to hold any sort of data that you want to give it. So if you have a person's name that might change pretty often, what you can do is you can put you can create a variable and you can reference that variable, and anytime you change this name here, it can go there. So if you need to do something for a guy named Steve, and tomorrow you need to do that same, you rerun that same script or that same command for a person named Cheryl, you can do that. And I'm going to show you ways that you can use variables inside of PowerShell today. Let's get started. So let's say we have a basic command such as get child item path, and we'll just kind of hold this as a placeholder and say path here verbose. I like to do verbose on a lot of things just so that I can know if the command runs and any sort of things that might come up with the command running. So now let's say this path changes. So like let's say that we're gonna want the C drive right now, but later let's say we want to try the E drive. How do we do that? So first, we need to create a variable by using this $sign. What this $sign does is essentially tell PowerShell that, hey, I'm either referencing a variable or I'm creating a variable, and you do both essentially the same way. So you can create a variable by doing $signs such as $new path, and if you want to make that equal something, it is easy. You put an equal sign, and that can be anything you want. So if you want it to be a number, new path now equals 0. If you want that to be, that C drive we were talking about before, it is now the C drive. If you want it to be both C and E as like a list, now it's C and E. If you want it to be something such as like, an array that you want to feed stuff into later and then, change data or manipulate that some way, shape or form later, you can do that by doing the at and then this. This means array. That is what that means. So let's get started in seeing how these variables are referenced inside of a commandlet or inside of a little script that we do. So what we'll do is we'll again say that equals C, and then we'll change this over here to reference that variable by doing a $sign. So we'll do $new path, and we'll say verbose. And what this will do, theoretically, it will get the new path of C. All right, so because I'm inside of my user profile, it is just getting the child item of what I said. But we can do C Windows. And so what we'll do is we'll do that again. And now we can see all the items and files that exist inside of C Windows. So let's say we wanted to make this a list. How do we reference a list? So because there's multiple values, we can't just do it the same way that we did it before. We'd have to run a for each statement. And that is actually easy to do. So we do C Windows and we'll do E here. And what we'll do is we'll then run a for each statement. So for each object in new, for each item in the new path list, we will then execute this script and we'll look for the item. So what this says, so hey, put this in, put whatever value in at this item variable. So okay, so for each thing that we're hitting here inside of new path, put this inside of here. So for the first iteration, it will say, hey, for the first item inside of new path, I equal C Windows. Then for the second item in new path, I equal E. And so we'll see that here in just a second. All right, so we can see that did that C Windows again, and then it did the directory E right here. So let's see how we can utilize that empty array that I talked about and showed before. So let's create that empty array again. So we'll do the @ symbol here. And if we needed to add something into that array, so let's say I wanted to just do something like test path dash path equals C Windows, and so we'll say new path plus equals this one. So what that means is we'll take whatever values already exist, and so the plus equal means we'll take the value that already exists inside a new path, which at this time is just blank, and we'll say add in whatever value we get from here, which theoretically should be true, because what test path will do is it will go through and say, hey, does this path exist? Yes or no, and that's all it gives, true, false. So let's run it. All right. So what's also neat about being able to feed these commandlets into a variable like we did here with this new path is it allows you to view that data later. You don't necessarily have to view it now if you don't want to. As we can see here, it just said, hey, I ran what you told me to ran, and you didn't tell me to put that data out. So what we'll do then is we'll rerun that again, but we're going to ask to see what's in it. Tell me what's in this variable. Boom, new path is true. So what we will do then is let's add to it. Let's add a string. So we'll say new path plus equals testing this out, and we'll do it again. And again, as I mentioned before, we did not request for PowerShell to give us that data again. So we'll say new path. Boom. So not only did it take the Boolean, the true false that we saw from inside of test path, but PowerShell is so great at accepting essentially anything you want inside of a variable. You can make PowerShell variables anything you want. You can make them a list, you can make them a number, a Boolean, just basically anything, and you don't got to tell it that at all. That's one of the big benefits of PowerShell. And so with PowerShell, you can also easily reference things inside of strings. So if we wanted to create a new line here, we're going to say what write-host does is it essentially just writes out to the prompt that you're running inside of PowerShell, and we'll say, hey, testing out variables. And what we will do then is we'll just put our $sign here, say new path. And what that would do is let's say, hey, it will output testing out variables. We don't got to do anything fancy to call in that variable, especially inside of a string. And that's it. But when you do call it out inside of write-host, like I did here, it does become a string unless you format it in a special way before you do that. But this is very useful for, let's say, let's go back to our items of, creating a list of names, and we got, Sean, and we got Linda, and we wanted to say, for each name in list names, let's, prompt a message. I am a big fan of name. And what that'll do is go through and say, I'm a big fan of both Sean, I'm a big fan of Linda. So these are some very basic PowerShell, ways of using variables. You can get really in depth with variables inside of PowerShell, but if you are new to PowerShell, this is one of the ways that you can get started with it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like this video, give it a thumbs down. If you want more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, follow for more, and I'll see you next time.